You wake up in a cold stone chamber. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and animal hide. Outside, the sound of hooves and bells echo through the barracks, and then it hits you. You're a knight, and it's the year 1257. You're not used to the armour yet. It's heavier than all your childhood dreams combined. Your body aches from yesterday's training and breakfast. Just a chunk of bread so dry it could double as a weapon, and suddenly you're thinking, why did I ever think being a knight would be glorious? Welcome to 2 hours of gentle bedtime storytelling, where you don't just hear about history, you live it. You'll spend a full day in iron armour, inside a damp medieval castle, balancing feudal duties, muddy patrols, cold meals, and the looming threat of war or worse, infection. And yes, there will be moments when you can't help but whisper, I wouldn't survive a single day as a medieval knight. So, before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin your new life back in time. You awaken to the soft clatter of armour echoing down the corridor. A rooster crows somewhere in the wet distance, muffled by the thick stone walls of the keep. It's not even dawn yet, and the fire in your chamber has long since gone out. Your breath fogs in front of your face. Congratulations, you're a knight. And also very, very cold. The wool blanket barely helped. Your cot is stuffed with straw that smells faintly of mildew, and your joints ache. Not from battle, but from existing. You dreamed of waking up in luxury, maybe silk sheets, a goblet of wine by the bed. What you get instead is a half-frozen toe and the sound of your squire tripping over your greaves in the dark. Sorry, my lord, he mutters, trying to be helpful while simultaneously knocking over your helmet. You sit up slowly. The chainmail hauberk, folded at the foot of your bed, gleams faintly in the early grey light. It's heavy just to look at, like your future. You'll need help getting into it, of course. That's what squires are for, armour donning, horse brushing, and, if we're honest, absorbing blame for things you did yourself. The air is damp and smells of tallow smoke, moss, and the faint musk of the rushes on the floor. Someone tried to replace them last week. Someone failed. You manage to drag yourself upright. Your knees pop, loudly. Welcome to your 20s, medieval edition. You'll be lucky if you make it past 35 with those knees intact. Historians still argue whether knights suffered more long-term damage from war or from their own armour. Either way, the first injury of the day usually comes from trying to pee while wearing plate leggings. Luckily, you're not in full gear yet. Your squire helps you into your tunic, rough linen, brownish from age and inexplicably damp at the seams. Then the Chaucer's tight wool hose, the gambeson a quilted underjacket designed to soak up both sweat and trauma, and finally, the chainmail. You raise your arms in surrender while he slides the hauberk down over your shoulders. It's like being swallowed by a metal bear. You're now roughly 20 kilograms heavier than you were 10 minutes ago and still haven't had breakfast, or used the latrine. Good luck. The courtyard below is already alive. Horses snort in protest. Blacksmiths hammer lazily on cold anvils, and a group of other knights are gathered near the training yard, laughing at something that ends with the word dung. You can't quite hear it, but you assume it's about the new guy. There's no mirror, of course, but your reflection glints faintly in your sword. You look heroic, in a deeply impractical way. Your helmet doesn't fit quite right. Your arming belt hangs crooked, and your right gauntlet smells suspiciously like pickled fish. Still, you take a breath. This is what you wanted, right? Glory, honour, all that embroidered nonsense in the bard songs. The truth is less flattering. You've essentially signed up for a lifestyle that's 1 part gym class, 1 part unpaid internship, and 1 part medieval pest control. But at least you've got status now. Power. A title. No salary, though that's a modern idea. Back in the keep, the steward announces that Lord Hugo expects all knights at council before sunrise. That gives you 10 minutes to hobble downstairs without falling on your face. The stairs are stone, worn down by centuries of mud, armour, and regret. You try to descend with dignity, but mostly achieve a sort of clanking controlled fall. Outside, rain mists across the courtyard in that charming Norman way. Soft but soaking. The kind of weather that feels like God's own sneeze. You reach the group just in time to hear someone mutter, "Fresh meat." You're fairly certain it was a joke. Mostly. Somewhere deep inside your helm, a single bead of sweat begins its descent. It's going to be a long day. But hey, no Wi-Fi, no deodorant, no dental plan. But you've got honour. Right. The council chamber smells like old books, wet fur, and someone's breakfast that didn't stay down. You stand awkwardly near the rear wall, flanked by a knight with no eyebrows and another with a scar that could probably tell stories on its own. They don't acknowledge you. That's fine. You're new. You'll be invisible for a while unless you mess up. Then you'll be legendary. But not in the good way. Lord Hugo arrives, dragging behind him the long wool cloak of someone who enjoys reminding others that he owns more land than they do. His beard is forked, his eyes red from either wine or prayer, or both. He clears his throat and begins talking about a dispute between 2 villages over who owns the rights to graze sheep on a patch of forest no one even likes. This is your first taste of nightly adventure livestock arbitration. You glance around the room. Most knights are pretending to listen. One is definitely asleep. Another is cleaning under his fingernails with a dagger, which feels like both a safety violation and a metaphor. Sir Thomas, Lord Hugo says. Everyone looks up. You freeze. That's you. That's your knight name, at least. Sir Thomas of Bois-quelque-chose. A title longer than your actual estate, which consists of a field, a shed, and some highly indecisive chickens. You'll ride to Chanterelle and speak with the reeve. Lord Hugo continues. Settle it. Peacefully. Peacefully. In knight speak. That means don't burn anything unless you absolutely have to. You bow stiffly, or try to. The chainmail bunches at the back and your gambeson shifts weirdly. You look less like a dignified knight and more like a falling hay bale. Historians still argue whether feudal lords delegated tasks out of trust or because they didn't want to leave the fire. Either way, congratulations, you're now part knight, part rural conflict mediator. After council, you're handed a satchel containing a half-finished map, a token of your lord's authority, basically a fancy coin, and a pouch of stale hazelnuts. No coin, no backup, just you, your squire, and the horse that's already developed an attitude problem. You go to the stables, where your destrier, his name is Loop, because someone once thought that was cool, greets you with a snort and a backward step. He's massive, broad-chested, and deeply offended that you're trying to mount him in the rain. Your squire offers a helpful boost. It's not helpful. You land in the saddle sideways, armour squeaking like a tortured wine cask. Eventually, you straighten out. The reins feel slick. The sky is dripping again. Off you go. The roads are generous to call roads. Mud trails winding through forest and fields, dotted with puddles large enough to drown small ambitions. Your squire rides behind you, humming a song that involves something about turnips and betrayal. You try not to listen. The morning drags. Your armour is already damp. Your thighs ache from the saddle. Your back itches where the gambeson has bunched up. and you're beginning to understand why knights were so grumpy all the time. A crow cackles somewhere to your left, as if in judgment. You wonder briefly if it's an omen, or just a crow that knows how this trip will go. You pass peasants along the road, mud-caked, hunched, and entirely unimpressed. One nods slightly, the other just stares. Knights used to be awe-inspiring. These days, they're more like armoured tax collectors with swords. Will there be a fight? My lord your squire asks, trying to sound eager. You consider, probably not, but possibly yes, over sheep, which, in your mind, makes it worse. Midday comes. You pause in a glade to eat the nuts and some bread that may technically be older than you. It crumbles into your gloves. You chew slowly, staring into the trees, imagining how glorious your life was supposed to be. No dragons, no maidens, no epic battles, just aching knees, bureaucratic errands, and rain in your boots. Still, it's not all bad. You're a landholder now. Technically, you have the right to carry a sword in public. You can order your squire to fetch things, though he usually forgets what, and you get to travel, which sounds romantic until you remember the saddle sores, the wolves, and the total absence of inns with real beds. Historians still argue whether knights were primarily warriors or local administrators. You're starting to think it's both, and neither. Mostly, you're just tired. A few more hours pass, and the village of Chanterelle finally appears, nestled in a misty valley. Smoke rises from chimneys, and sheep dot the hillside like grumpy clouds. You don't know it yet, but this is going to be the most boring siege of your life. But that's tomorrow. For now, you dismount with a groan, remove your helmet, and inhale the sweet fungal scent of wet sheep and chimney soot. The Reeves hut waits at the edge of the road. The door creaks. Your day is far from over. The Reeves hut leans slightly to the left. Like it, too, has given up on the structural integrity of rural diplomacy. A dog barks as you approach, more out of routine than enthusiasm, and a peasant boy scurries away the moment he sees your armour. You knock, though it feels redundant. Half the village is already watching. The Reeve answers the door with a look of confusion and mild panic. He's a wiry man with a nose like a bent carrot and fingers stained from ink or possibly goose droppings. Behind him, a single candle flickers in defiance of the damp. "Sir Knight," he says with a hasty bow, "we weren't expecting you till next week." You don't correct him. You're not entirely sure what week it is. The inside of the hut smells like cabbage, wet wool, and fear. The Reeve motions to a stool that collapses slightly when you try to sit. You settle for standing, your helmet under one arm, water dripping from your chainmail onto his dirt floor. He begins explaining the sheep problem. You try to listen. Really, you do. Apparently, the neighbouring village claims grazing rights on a forest patch technically under Chanterelle's jurisdiction. There was an incident involving a boundary marker, 2 very angry rams, and something about a stolen bell. It's all very tense. And then they insulted my cousin, the Reeve says, eyes wide. Called him a frog-footed flax thief. Historians still argue whether these kinds of petty disputes were genuine sources of medieval violence or just excuses to settle unrelated grudges. Based on what you're hearing, it's probably both. You sigh, trying to channel your inner peaceful enforcer of justice, which is difficult when your armour has begun to chafe and you haven't peed since sunrise. You ask to see the disputed land. The Reeve leads you out past the village, uphill toward a sparse forest that could barely sustain squirrels, let alone sheep. The ground squelches beneath your boots. Your squire trails behind, occasionally poking cowpats with the stick because he is, as always, an intellectual. When you reach the disputed area, the other party is already there, 3 men with axes. 2 of them shirtless despite the weather, which tells you everything about their personalities. They look at you, then at your armour, then back at their sheep, as if to say, "Really for this?" You initiate conversation. The leader, a red-faced man with arms like tree trunks, responds by spitting in the mud and saying something about highborn lapdogs. It's going great. Negotiations last about an hour. You try reason, appeal to land records, even mention the local bishop's disapproval of fraternal strife. None of it works. Eventually, you suggest a shared grazing agreement, seasonal rotation, and mutual penalties for theft. Everyone stares at you like you've just invented taxes. But miraculously, they accept, though mostly because you're armed, and they're not in the mood to test how serious you are. One man mutters something about coming back with cousins, which you choose to interpret as humour, modern-day comparison. You know those group projects where no one listens and you do all the work. Now imagine everyone has weapons, a grudge, and lives off turnips. Welcome to feudal diplomacy. As you ride back toward Chanterelle, your squire asks, "Do you think they'll keep the peace?" You pause for a week, maybe 2, until someone else's sheep eats someone else's grass again. By the time you return, the village women have prepared a thank you meal, which consists of boiled beans, root mash, and something called wet pie, which turns out to be exactly what it sounds like. You smile graciously and chew carefully, hoping there are no bones or curses involved. The reeve offers you his own cot for the night. It's made of bundled straw, slightly less mouldy than your one back home. You remove your chainmail and let it slump onto the ground with a sound like a collapsed chimney. Your arms tingle in relief and something resembling blood circulation. Your squire sleeps in the stable, curled up next to Loop, who seems to like him more than you. As you lie down, staring at the low thatch ceiling, the candle sputters out. Your shoulders throb. Your thighs feel like they've been kicked by fate itself. Your dignity smells like sheep. You wanted to be a knight. You got your wish. You also got foot fungus. Historians still debate whether the knightly class genuinely enjoyed their status, or simply endured it with increasing bitterness and wine. Judging from your current state, the latter is winning. Rain taps gently on the roof above. You close your eyes and try not to dream of sheep riots. The next morning greets you not with fanfare, but with the faint sensation that your spine has fused to a bale of straw. You sit up slowly, wincing, realising the cot provided by the reeve has gifted you a complimentary assortment of scratches, bug bites, and a mild hay rash on your neck. Delightful. Outside, the village is already awake. The smells of damp soil, cooking onions, and overworked livestock waft through the window slats. Somewhere, a chicken is losing an argument. You dress in silence while your squire struggles with your greaves, muttering something about a splinter and a chicken that looked at him funny. You don't ask. Breakfast is a thin broth and a hunk of dark bread so tough it could double as a weapon. You chew mechanically while the reeve gives his thanks again, promising to send word to Lord Hugo about your fine conduct. Whether that means heroic restraint or you didn't stab anyone is up for interpretation. Your horse, Loop, is less enthusiastic about departing. He flicks his ears and offers one half-hearted kick at the stable wall before letting your squire saddle him. You mount awkwardly. The rain from yesterday never really stopped, only paused to build suspense. The ride back to the keep is uneventful, which is to say, your knees ache, your lower back whines, and the constant slap of wet mail against your thighs slowly chips away at what remains of your optimism. Your squire sings something about a lady and a barrel. You beg him, gently, to stop. Halfway through the journey, You spot a group of children playing with wooden swords near a field. They stop when they see you. One raises a stick and shouts, "I'm Sir Thomas, defender of justice." You give a solemn nod, unsure whether to feel proud or ashamed. They've somehow imagined you as noble, bold, and clean. All three are lies. Historians still argue whether knights were true role models or simply the most violent people who could afford horses. Either way, you've inspired at least one muddy child, which is more than most of your adult peers. You arrive back at the keep near dusk. The sky's the colour of old pewter, and the wind bites with a new chill. Winter's not here yet, but it's lurking. You dismount and hand the reins to a stable boy who promptly drops them in the mud. Loop rolls his eyes at you. Inside, you report to Lord Hugo, who listens with all the enthusiasm of a man waiting for cheese to ripen. He nods, grunts something about competence, and waves you away. You retreat to your chamber, where the fire hasn't been lit and your armour now smells unmistakably of sheep and peasant stew. You begin to remove your gear, one damp, soul-crushing layer at a time. The gambeson peels off like old wallpaper. Your tunic clings unpleasantly to your back. Your boots have developed their own microclimate. You collapse onto your cot with a groan. The straw pokes through the mattress like judgmental thorns. It's here, in the quiet dark, that the thought creeps in, is this it? You thought knighthood would be glory, romance, maybe a song or two. Instead, it's sheep negotiations, endless mud, and an armour rash that might be evolving into something sentient. You think back to what you left behind. Your family, your childhood home, your cousin who wanted to be a baker. He probably has warm bread and a wife who likes him. You have a dented helmet and a drafty tower room, modern-day comparison. You know that moment when you realise your dream job is 90% paperwork and 10% crying in the supply closet. Now add chainmail and dysentery. Welcome to the 13th century. A bell rings in the courtyard below. Evening prayers. You sigh, pull on your cloak, and make your way to the chapel. The chapel smells of candle wax, damp stone, and faint despair. A monk chants in Latin while a dozen men kneel, mumbling through verses they barely understand. You do your best to look pious while trying not to fall asleep. You remember the priest's sermon last week about humility, about enduring suffering for God and King. You suspect the monk has never worn armour in a hailstorm. Historians still debate how sincere the knightly faith was. Some see them as holy warriors, others as sinners with good press. You just want dry socks and maybe an apple. Back in your room, your squire snores gently in the corner. He's wrapped in your spare cloak and curled like a cat. You let him be. Tomorrow's another day, and he'll need the energy to carry your sword, fetch your mail, and misplace your helmet again. You lie back on the cot, staring at the beams above. A spider dangles lazily from the ceiling. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. You wake to the sound of bells again. This time not from the chapel, but from the training yard. Metal clashes against metal in a rhythmic clang that rattles your teeth before you've even left the cot. A rooster crows, late and unapologetic. Morning has arrived, and with it, your favourite part of being a knight mandatory weapons practice. Your body protests every motion. Your back pops. Your knees creak. Your right shoulder refuses to rotate more than halfway, which should be concerning, but you don't have access to a chiropractor, CERSM, or the concept of one. You haul yourself up and drag on your gear, layer by cursed layer. The gambeson feels wetter than yesterday, which shouldn't be possible. Your mail shirt sags with the weight of damp iron and unmet expectations. By the time you arrive in the yard, several other knights are already mid-drill, swinging swords, blocking blows, and occasionally slipping in the mud. You spot Sir Alan, a grizzled man who's lost 2 fingers and most of his enthusiasm, barking orders at a squire who clearly didn't sign up for this. Sir Thomas, he calls. You're late. You consider explaining that you barely slept and possibly dislocated something last night while sneezing. Instead, you just nod and pick up a wooden practice sword. It's heavier than it looks. Everything is heavier than it looks when you're wearing 25 kilograms of regrets. The next hour is a blur of swings, blocks, footwork, and falling. You take a hit to the ribs that leaves you wheezing and another to the thigh that feels personal. At one point, someone's helmet goes flying and no one bothers to stop. Historians still argue whether nightly training was disciplined military education or organised assault with expensive props. From where you're standing or trying to stand, it's probably both. Eventually, Sir Alan calls for a break. You stagger over to the water trough and splash your face. The water is icy, bracing, and full of suspicious floaters. You drink it anyway. Hydration before hospitalisation. A younger knight approaches, all clean armour and smug energy. Tough morning, he asks, smirking. You smile politely and try to recall if there are rules against stabbing colleagues during training. After practice, you head to the hall for second breakfast, which is identical to first breakfast, only colder. The bread is stale, the broth is thinner, and someone has taken all the decent cheese. Again. You sit in silence and eat mechanically, your body vibrating slightly from fatigue. Across the table, another knight is picking at his food with a gauntlet still on. He tells a story about getting kicked by a horse during the last hunt. You nod, vaguely jealous. At least he got to sit down afterward. Modern comparison. Imagine going to CrossFit twice a day in a raincoat made of metal and being rewarded with a crust of bread and a nod from your supervisor. That's your life now. Your squire finds you as you finish eating, holding a bundle of damp linen. Your underthings, my lord, he announces, far too cheerfully. You accept the bundle and retreat to your chamber to change. The linen sticks to your skin as you peel it off, revealing new bruises and creative shapes. One looks like a map of the Holy Roman Empire, upside down. You sit for a moment, shirtless, watching steam rise from your own body. You wonder how many of your fellow knights are faking it, smiling through the pain, pretending their armour fits, acting like they wouldn't rather be in a bakery or monastery or anywhere with a bench. Historians still debate whether the knight's greatest weapon was his sword or his capacity for denial. You suspect the answer is yes. The rest of the day is yours, technically. No patrols, no diplomacy, no sheep. You consider writing a letter to your cousin, if only to remember how to hold a quill. You try. The ink is watery, your handwriting worse than usual, and you accidentally smear half a sentence across the page with your armour elbow. You write anyway. Cousin, I've survived another week. My feet hurt. My squire may be plotting something. I miss bread that doesn't fight back. Yours in chainmail, Thomas. You sign it with a blotch, and wonder if the pigeon will survive the trip this time. By mid-afternoon, you return to the courtyard to observe sparring from a distance, nursing your side and pretending to be above it all. In truth, you're just trying not to vomit from that last sword hit. You're approached by a boy, 10, maybe 11, clutching a wooden sword far too large for his hands. Will I be a knight too someday, he asks, wide-eyed. You look down at him, then at the bruises, the grime, the sky that hasn't been blue in 3 days. Yes, you say, with the faintest smirk, if you're lucky, and if he's really lucky, maybe he'll become a monk instead. The next morning begins not with bells, but with shouting, angry, urgent, echoing through the stone halls like thunder in a cave. You jolt upright, heart pounding, fists half clenched before you've even remembered where, or when, you are. Your squire bursts in a moment later, wide-eyed and breathless. "My lord, it's Lord Hugo. He wants all knights in the Great Hall. Now. You're already halfway into your trousers. Whatever this is, it's not a drill, or if it is, it's the kind with real consequences. You throw on your gambeson, grab your belt, and make a fast, clanking descent down the stairs, armour still unbuckled. In the hall, the other knights are already assembled, still fastening gear, brushing crumbs off tunics. No one looks fully awake. Everyone looks worried. Lord Hugo is pacing at the front, scroll in hand, jaw clenched. "There's been an attack," he says flatly. "2 villages east of here. Bandits, they say, or deserters from the king's army. Either way, they took grain, livestock, and left 5 dead." A low murmur spreads through the room. You shift uncomfortably. Grain theft isn't rare. Death is more serious. This smells less like hungry peasants and more like organised trouble. You're assigned to ride with a small company before midday, tasked with scouting, assessing damage, and making an impression. You know what that means. Your sword's not just for show today. Historians still argue whether feudal lords genuinely protected their vassals, or simply used these moments as excuses to flex power. As you cinch your belt and check your scabbard, you suspect the answer is both. Outside, your squire loads your pack while trying not to panic. He's seen combat, sort of, once, during a hunting accident involving an angry boar and an unfortunate baker. He still doesn't like loud noises. You mount Loop, who seems to sense the tension. He doesn't bite anyone today, which is a good sign. The company departs just after noon, a column of creaking saddles and dull mail glinting under a grey sun. The road is narrow and mud-caked, bordered by damp fields and trees that look like they're hiding something. The air smells like churned soil and unease. You ride in silence. The other knights too focused to talk. The weight of your armour feels different today, less theatrical, more final. You reach the first village near sunset. Smoke lingers, not cooking smoke, burnt thatched roof smoke. You dismount, drawing your sword instinctively. Chickens peck at scorched earth. A man kneels by a collapsed fence, weeping over what used to be a pig pen. The scene is quiet, but not peaceful. Doors hang off hinges, a cart is overturned, a scarecrow has been decapitated. Not symbolic, probably just bored vandals. But it feels like a message anyway. A woman with a torn shawl approaches your group. She speaks fast, panicked. Her words come in bursts between sobs. They came at night. Torches. They took flour, salt, beat the priest. He wouldn't hand over the altar cup. You nod, listening, jaw tight. You want to promise it won't happen again, but that's a lie. Instead, you ask for details: how many, how armed, which direction they left. She doesn't know, just that they vanished into the woods, like shadows with boots. Your captain gives the order to rest for the night and pursue at dawn. You volunteer for perimeter duty, mostly to keep moving. Your nerves won't let you sleep yet. Modern comparison. You know that feeling when you sense something's wrong in your apartment building, but no one wants to call the cops yet. Now replace your apartment with a smouldering hut, and the neighbours with armed thieves. You walk the edge of the village, sword in hand, scanning tree lines. The wind whistles through bare branches. An owl calls. A twig snaps, but it's only your squire, sneaking extra bread from the rations. You don't scold him. You're too tired. Back near the main square, a makeshift fire burns low. A few knights sit hunched nearby, silent, sharpening blades that are already sharp enough. One hums a battle hymn under his breath, the same line over and over. You don't know whether it's faith or habit. You lie down eventually, sword still at your side. You use your cloak as a blanket, your gauntlet as a pillow. It's not comfortable, but comfort isn't part of the package. Not for you, not for anyone here. Historians still debate whether medieval warfare was more about violence or psychological wear. Right now, lying in the dirt, armour biting into your ribs, you're fairly sure it's both. The stars above twinkle coldly through the cloud breaks. Somewhere in the dark, someone laughs, not joyfully, but sharply, like they know something you don't. You close your eyes, gripping your sword just a little tighter. Tomorrow might be worse. Dawn arrives like a slap. You're jerked awake by the cold, your back stiff, your fingers curled so tightly around your sword hilt that it takes a full minute to unclench them. The village is silent, but the silence feels uneasy, like a held breath. The fire is out, your joints ache, your eyes burn. You've slept in armour again, which should be illegal, or at least frowned upon by someone with medical training, which doesn't exist yet. Congratulations. You're now one of history's most underpaid security guards. Your captain barks orders, quietly, but firmly. The scouts return with the lead broken branches and footprints heading into the forest to the west. Likely 8 men. Possibly more. Definitely armed. Possibly desperate. That's the worst kind. You mount Loop and follow the others through a narrow path flanked by black pines. The morning mist clings low to the ground, coiling around your horse's legs like it's trying to pull you off. Birds are eerily quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a crow calls once and then stops. You try not to think about it. The trail twists and dips. You duck under branches, wince at thorns snagging your cloak. Your squire is behind you, struggling to keep up, wheezing audibly through his nose. He's not built for this. Neither are you, honestly. About an hour in, the scouts signal a halt. You dismount silently, creeping forward through damp undergrowth. The air smells of rotting leaves and unwashed ambition. Up ahead, just beyond a rise, you spot a crude camp, some canvas strung between trees, a fire pit still smoking, and figures sleeping or passed out beneath cloaks. Bandits. Real ones. The kind the songs pretend are romantic, but who, in reality, have lice and bad tempers. You draw your sword. Your fingers tremble a little. It's not fear. You tell yourself. It's the cold. The sweat running down your back disagrees. The captain gives the signal. What follows is short, violent, and utterly without glory. You rush the camp, steel flashing, boots pounding, your heart hammering like it's trying to escape. Someone shouts. Someone else runs. A man with a beard like a dead ferret swings an axe at you. Too wide. Too slow. You parry. You counter. You knock him flat. You don't look twice. It's over in minutes. 2 bandits are dead. 3 are captured. The others scatter, probably into tales told by terrified peasants for the next decade. Historians still argue whether knights were defenders of justice or just the biggest bullies in the woods. As you stand over a campfire full of scorched beans and regret, you're not sure either. You bind your wounds, not yours, luckily, but a fellow knight's arm is gashed, and your squire fumbles the bandage like he's trying to gift wrap a fish. Still, it gets done. You search the camp. No treasure. No noble hostages. Just stolen grain. A few cracked mugs, and a surprisingly well-preserved cheese wheel that your captain confiscates for evidence. Right. Modern comparison. Imagine storming into a shady warehouse expecting a mafia showdown, and instead finding 3 exhausted guys and a pile of expired canned soup, you burn the camp, not out of cruelty, but as a message this isn't a safe hideout anymore. The fire crackles as the canvas folds in on itself, and smoke curls up into the canopy like a medieval exclamation mark. The walk back is slow. No one talks much. The horses are tired. The men are dirtier. One knight is nursing a sprained ankle and swearing creatively under his breath. You feel weirdly hollow, not triumphant, just heavier. At the village, the people greet your return with cautious relief. No cheering, just nods, cautious eyes, a few whispered blessings. You nod back, wave once, and try not to feel like a fraud. You helped today, sort of, but you're also reminded how fragile this world is, how close everything sits to chaos, a bad harvest, a missed tax, a few desperate men in the wrong mood. You mount up, rain beginning to fall again in soft, steady drops, as if the sky itself is trying to wash it all away. Back at the keep, no one's waiting for you. No feast, no bard to immortalise your deeds. Just a cold tower room and a pile of damp laundry that somehow smells worse than when you left. You peel off your armour, each piece heavier now than before. Your tunic is stained, your hands blistered, your jaw aches from clenching it all day. You sit on your cot, staring into the fireplace that no one lit. This is knighthood. No parades, no dragons, no damsels, just duty and mud and bruises in places you didn't know had nerves. You lie back, close your eyes and whisper to no one, still alive. It's not much, but it's something. Morning comes with a surprise, no alarm bells, no screaming, no immediate threat to chase down. For once, your body wakes before duty does. You lie still for a moment, eyes half open, listening to the soft drip of rain against the shuttered window. Your shoulders ache, your thighs protest. But there's a strange, unfamiliar feeling beneath the bruise's calm. You get up slowly, savouring the luxury of not rushing into your armour like a mobile emergency response unit. Your squire still sleeps curled in the corner like a disgruntled hedgehog under a blanket. You let him be. Even squires need peace. Sometimes. Breakfast is simple, warm bread, hard cheese, and broth that actually tastes like something other than dishwater. It's not exactly a cappuccino and croissant. But hey, at least it didn't come with a side of fire and banditry. You decide to take a walk around the castle grounds. It's a rare chance to remember you're not just a blade with legs. The outer bailey is bustling with activity apprentices hauling wood, washerwomen shouting across the stream, a blacksmith hammering rhythmically while singing about a goat that left him. Life in all its muddy, mundane glory. You pause at the stables. Loop greets you with a dismissive snort. You reach up to scratch behind his ears and nearly lose a finger. Affection. Noted. Wandering further, you pass the training yard, where the younger squires are already doing drills. One of them is using his shield backward. Another keeps tripping over his own sword belt. You watch for a while, arms folded, trying not to laugh. But you do, a little, quietly. It's here, while you're standing on the edge of the yard, that a visiting knight arrives. He's from a neighbouring barony, taller, shinier, cleaner, and clearly one of those courtly knights, the kind who can recite poetry and somehow still keep their tunics white. He rides a pristine white mare, his armour gleams. His gloves probably smell like lavender. You hate him instantly. He greets Lord Hugo with a practised bow and hands over a sealed scroll. You can't hear the words, but you see the frown forming on your lord's face. Trouble. Again. Something to do with a broken marriage contract. Disputed land. and someone accidentally dueling the wrong cousin. Historians still argue whether medieval politics were driven more by personal insult or property. Judging by Lord Hugo's scowl, it's probably both, with a generous helping of family drama. After the visiting knight departs without a speck of mud on him, of course, Lord Hugo summons you. You're going to the nearby castle of Lord Gervais, not to fight, but to represent your liege in a discussion about contested hunting rights. Yes, your next assignment is a noble version of who gets to shoot deer in which forest. Modern comparison. Think two billionaires arguing over a parking spot, and you're the poor intern sent to smooth things over. You pack lightly. Your squire helps, grumbling about how none of your tunics match. You briefly consider wearing your nice armour, but then remember it still smells faintly of sheep tallow and despair. The ride to Lord Gervais's estate takes half a day and all of your patience. The rain picks up again, just enough to soak through the knees of your coursers. Your squire keeps humming that turnip song. Loop stops every few minutes to consider whether he should throw you into a ditch. By the time you arrive, you're dripping, freezing, and slightly more murderous than usual. The steward greets you with an expression usually reserved for unwanted tax collectors. You're escorted to a damp guest room with a bed that might actually be filled with rocks. You change into a dry tunic still itchy, splash some water on your face definitely cold, and head to the great hall for the friendly meeting. Lord Gervais is large, loud, and not especially interested in compromise. The discussion spirals quickly. Something about a 200-year-old border stone, a pig that went missing last spring, and a hunting hawk that was clearly insulted. You blink slowly, wondering how your life has become a medieval version of a neighbourhood HOA drama. Still, you hold your ground. You quote laws you barely understand. Mention God once or twice, always a good move, and eventually convince both sides to agree to rotating hunting access, as long as the boars are shared fairly. It's the dumbest victory of your career. You ride back in the dark, slightly proud, entirely soaked, and starting to develop a cough. You sneeze 3 times before reaching the gate. Your squire offers you half a boiled onion as a celebratory snack. You accept it because you're too cold to argue. Historians still debate whether knights were truly respected for their wisdom, or just tolerated because they were armed. You feel more like a soggy advisor with a helmet than any kind of legend. You return to your tower, hang your cloak near the hearth still cold, and collapse onto your cot with your boots still on. Your sword thuds to the floor beside you. You let it lie, outside. The wind howls through the cracks in the stone, and the rain drums its lazy war song on the roof. You pull your blanket up, sigh, and whisper, still alive, which, for a night, counts as success. You wake to a throat that feels like it was scrubbed with a bramble bush and lungs that whistle when you exhale. Wonderful. The onion didn't save you. Your squire enters, bright-eyed and oblivious, holding a basin of water that smells vaguely of rosemary and regret. "You don't look well, my lord," he says cheerfully, as if you're unaware of the internal civil war happening between your immune system and medieval climate. "No," you rasp. "But I'm upright. That'll do." You attempt to dress, discovering that every joint in your body has decided to mutiny. You wince, pulling on your tunic. Chainmail is out of the question today. You settle for a heavy cloak and a sword belt slung low to imply still dangerous, even if it now feels more like a fashion statement than a threat. Downstairs, the great hall is buzzing. Lord Hugo has returned from an early hunt, and the spoils, a deer and a half-dozen hares, are laid across the table like trophies in a butcher's exhibit. You offer a nod, which he returns with a grunt. Affection. Feudal addition. You're about to sit down when the steward announces that the castle physician has arrived. A hush falls over the room. Everyone looks around awkwardly. No one makes eye contact. The physician, a man with wild white hair and a robe that smells like vinegar and dried mushrooms, approaches you with a confidence that immediately makes you nervous. "Let me see your tongue," he says. You obey, because you're brave, but not that brave. Unbalanced humours, possibly melancholic bile, or demons in the throat. He prescribes boiled leeks, a poultice made from horse dung and wine, and, for good measure, a prayer to St. Blaise. You nod solemnly and do none of that. Historians still debate whether medieval physicians actually believed in these treatments, or were simply improvising with what was around. Either way, you'll be sticking to broth. Thank you. You spend most of the day indoors, huddled near the hearth with a stack of scrolls you pretend to read while secretly dozing. Outside, the rain turns to sleet. The wind moans like a widow in a bad poem. Your squire tries to entertain you by recounting stories he's heard from the kitchen one about a haunted chicken coop, another involving a cook, a dog, and some very misused butter. You laugh once. It hurts. By mid-afternoon, you're summoned to the training yard, not to fight, thankfully, but to oversee Squire's assessments. You're handed a crude slate and a wax tablet for notes. You try to look wise while sneezing into your cloak every 7 minutes. The squires line up nervously, each with oversized wooden swords and dreams too big for their current coordination. You watch them stumble through drills, correcting their form with a few muttered pointers like "don't fall over and try hitting the target, not your friend." One boy asks you how many men you've slain in battle. You pause. The answer, technically, is 0. You've hit plenty of people, just never fatally. Mostly bruises and one broken nose. Your own. You clear your throat unhelpfully, squint into the middle distance, and say, enough to know it's not like the songs. He looks disappointed. That's fine. Truth usually is modern-day equivalent. It's like being a middle manager at a summer camp for emotionally unstable interns, with swords and no insurance. After the drills, you return to your chamber and finally take the boiled leeks your squire prepared. If only because chewing anything else feels like combat. They're slimy, bland, slightly crunchy in a way that vegetables shouldn't be. You lie down early, wrapped in all 3 of your blankets, trying to sweat the illness out the traditional way through sheer misery. Outside, the sleet thickens. Your window rattles. Somewhere, a stable hand curses loudly and creatively about frozen water troughs. You cough so hard your eyes water. Still alive, you whisper hoarsely, because you're beginning to think that might be your catchphrase. Historians still argue whether knights truly feared death or saw it as an occupational inconvenience. You, at this moment, just fear having to climb stairs again. Your squire lights a small oil lamp and sets it beside your cot. "Rest well, my lord," he says, softly. You nod. Close your eyes. Sleep creeps in with the snow. You wake up to sunlight. Actual, honest-to-God sunlight. Not the grey sludge that usually passes for morning in Normandy. It spills through your window like a miracle, warming the stone floor and casting golden squares on your boots. For a second, you wonder if you've died. Then your back cracks when you sit up, and you remember no, you're just a knight with sciatica. Your squire enters moments later with a jug of warm water, fresh bread, and something that might be cheese. You're lucky. "My lord," he says, setting the tray down. No council this morning, but no drills either. You blink. No assignments. No surprise sheep-related emergencies. No one needs you to duel a cousin over soup. What are you supposed to do with that? After eating and spending 5 minutes trying to chew the cheese without losing a tooth, you wander the grounds. With the sun out, the castle almost looks romantic if you squint. The frost has melted into slick mud, and the air smells like thawing earth and wood smoke instead of mildew and moral fatigue. The squires are polishing armour in the yard, competing to see who can shine a helmet the fastest. One is clearly cheating with a bit of stolen lard. You nod in approval. In the garden, 2 noble ladies walk arm in arm beneath the bare trees. One nods to you politely, the other avoids eye contact. Classic. You stop by the chapel, partly to be seen, partly because Brother Everard is known to bake honeyed oatcakes when he's feeling pious. You're in luck. He's lighting candles and humming, which is usually a sign of impending carbs. You sit with him for a while. He talks about Lent, repentance, and the dangers of idleness. You nod, occasionally chiming in with a cough or a strategic The oatcake is worth it. Historians still argue whether knights were truly religious or simply performed piety for appearance. Based on the number of swords hanging near the altar, it's fair to say the line was blurry. In the afternoon, you're invited, this time with actual courtesy, to join a falconry session with Lord Hugo and a few other knights. You haven't handled a hawk in months, and your squire gleams with excitement at the idea of watching you get clawed again. The hawk you're assigned is named Brunhilde. She's beautiful, sharp-eyed, and hates you immediately. She nips at your glove, flaps wildly, and defecates impressively on your sleeve. It's unclear whether it's a statement or just her usual greeting. Still, once airborne, she's magnificent, swooping through the crisp air, diving with purpose, chasing after a hapless rabbit that clearly regrets waking up today. You ride slowly across the fields, the sun warming your face, the wind tugging at your cloak. It's the kind of afternoon that bards sing about, assuming they leave out the part where your hawk eventually ignores you completely and returns to a different handler. Brunhilde has taste. One night jokes. You offer a tight smile and resist the urges to duel him with your hawking glove. Modern comparison. Imagine taking part in a corporate team-building retreat where one of the team members is a literal bird with commitment issues. On the way back to the keep, you pass a small group of villagers planting early seeds in thawed soil. One of them waves. You wave back. It feels oddly grounding, like you've rejoined the human race for a moment. Back in your chamber, you remove your now bird-stained cloak and sit near the fire with a mug of spiced ale. Your squire brushes your boots with more care than usual. "You seemed almost happy today," he says. You shrug. "I didn't fall off the horse. That's a win." He nods, as if you've just shared the ancient wisdom. You lie down that night feeling not whole, but slightly less cracked. Your limbs still ache. Your head still full of doubts and mud. But something about the day has softened you. Maybe it's the sun. Maybe it's the hawk. Maybe it's just a good oatcake and not being yelled at before noon. You close your eyes, still alive. You whisper. And for once, you almost smile after saying it. The next day, the sun is gone again. In its place clouds the colour of boiled wool, and a wind sharp enough to sting your cheeks before you've even left your bedroll. Your squire brings your breakfast, lukewarm barley stew and bread that might also qualify as masonry. He's humming again. That can't be a good sign. What is it, you ask, already suspicious? Well, my lord, there's a visitor waiting in the hall. Says he's from your father's manor. You freeze halfway through, chewing. That's not a phrase you expected to hear. Certainly not before finishing your morning stew. Your family hasn't sent word in over a year. Not since you were officially knighted and given this posting. There's been no news, no letters, Not even a drunken cousin stumbling through on pilgrimage, and now, suddenly, a visitor. You dress quickly, this time in your best surcoat. You try to smooth your hair with a damp cloth, but it only makes it worse. As you descend the stairs, your boots echo with just a little too much drama. In the hall stands a man you barely recognise older, hunched, with travel-worn boots and a familiar signet pinned to his cloak. "Sir Thomas," he says, bowing slightly. "I bring tidings from Bois Roche. That's your home. Or it was." The man delivers the news plainly. The way a messenger must your father has died. Fever took him. A sudden one. He lingered only a few days. He received last rites. His sword is now yours. The room spins, but you nod as if you expected this. Your father was never kind, but he was constant. He raised you with the belief that duty mattered more than happiness, that suffering was part of honour, that love was a luxury best left to peasants and poets. And now he's gone. You excuse yourself quietly, retreating to the courtyard under a threatening sky. You sit on a bench beside the old well, hands clenched, jaw tight. You feel not grief, exactly, not yet, but the strange, hollow pressure of the world shifting slightly off axis. You're no longer someone's son in waiting. Now you are the head of your house, whatever's left of it. Your squire finds you an hour later, eyes wide. "So, does this mean we're leaving?" You shake your head. Not yet. Because here's the problem. Your inheritance isn't just a title. It's a manor deep in debt, lands poorly tended, tenants on the edge of revolt, and an uncle who's probably squatting in the solar like it's already his. Historians still debate whether knightly landowners ever truly owned anything, or if they were just glorified accountants with swords. Right now, it feels like the latter. You send the messenger back with a sealed letter, formal condolences to your stepmother, an instruction to secure the estate, and a promise that you'll return after winter. You spend the rest of the day in a haze, no drills, no counsel, just walking through the stables, the training yard, the old chapel crypt, anywhere with silence and moss. At dusk, you finally draw your father's sword. The blade is older than you remembered, a bit rusted, heavier than yours. The hilt worn smooth from years of use and discipline. You sit with it for a long while, thumb resting against the nicked edge. This is what legacy feels like, not glory, but gravity. You lie awake that night, unable to sleep. The candle burns low. Your cot feels too soft, your blanket too light. Your thoughts spiral, backward, forward, nowhere helpful. Modern comparison. Imagine being promoted to CEO of a failing family business you never wanted, except the business involves serfs, unpaid taxes, and 3 goats that may or may not be legally yours. You finally drift off, sword laid across your knees, cloak pulled tight as wind hisses through the window slats. You whisper it again, out of habit, still alive, but for the first time in days, your voice catches just slightly on the second word. The next morning, you wake before the bell. The air's cold, but you don't feel it. You've been turning things over in your mind all night, your father's death, your inheritance, the manor you haven't seen in 3 winters. It's strange. You never particularly liked the place. Too many ghosts, too little firewood. But now that it's yours, it weighs on you in ways you hadn't expected. You get dressed slowly. Every motion is deliberate. You strap your belt tighter than usual. When your squire enters with breakfast, you wave him off and ask for parchment instead. "You're writing again?" he asks. Surprised. "No," you say, I'm planning. He nods solemnly, then tries to peek over your shoulder. You flick a crumb at him. By mid-morning, Lord Hugo summons you, not about your inheritance, but about something more immediate, a border skirmish. Not a full battle, thank the saints, but a heated disagreement over toll rights on a trade road with a neighbouring barony. You're not being sent to fight. You're being sent to watch. You'll ride with Sarah Lan, Lord Hugo says, not looking up from his papers. He knows the terrain. You know how not to start a war, which is generous of him to say, considering last month you nearly caused one over poultry. You leave that afternoon. The ride is long, through sloping woodland and valleys still streaked with frost. Sarah Lan talks the whole way, about his conquests both marital and martial, his opinions on barley ale, and his suspicion that gnomes live in the northern woods. You nod politely, wondering how he's still alive. The disputed checkpoint is little more than a muddy outpost with a half-collapsed palisade and a bored-looking guard dog. On one side, men loyal to Lord Hugo. On the other, knights bearing the green falcon crest of Baron Moncrieux, who has all the charm of a wasp in a doublet. You recognise one of Moncrieux's men. You once unhorsed him in a tourney. He hasn't forgiven you. The captains argue, loudly, the issue who gets to charge merchants passing through a 3-mile stretch of bog, which floods every spring and smells like rotting cabbage the rest of the year. In other words, a turf war over glorified swamp tolls. Historians still debate whether medieval nobles actually understood economics, or were just improvising with taxes until someone stabbed them. Judging by this encounter, the latter seems likely. You watch from your saddle, rain seeping into your collar, hands resting on your sword hilt. You offer one suggestion, splitting the tolls, rotating control each week, but it's met with the enthusiasm of a wet chicken. Eventually, someone suggests sending it to arbitration by a bishop. Everyone groans, but no one objects, because while bishops are long-winded, they're less likely to stab you mid-negotiation. So, a truce. For now, you and Sarah Lan head back to the keep in silence. He's unusually quiet, possibly thinking about gnomes again. That night, you return to your chamber and open your travel chest, the one you haven't touched in months. Inside your old doublet from Bois Roche, a wax-sealed scroll from your mother, and the last letter your father ever wrote you, still unopened. You stare at it for a long while. Your squire enters with fresh water, sees the letter, sees your face, retreats silently. You finally break the seal. Thomas, you were never meant to be a farmer. You have your mother's temper and my jaw. The land will never love you, but you must take care of it anyway. There's no glory in it, just duty and mud. That's knighthood. Don't let the house fall apart. Father. You read it twice, maybe 3 times. Modern comparison. It's like receiving a last voicemail from a father who never said I love you, but left you the Wi-Fi password to the family legacy. You fold the letter and place it in your belt pouch. You don't cry, but you do sit in the dark a while, staring into the embers. You don't whisper still alive tonight. You don't need to. It's barely dawn when you're woken by a horn blast. Short, sharp, and far too close. You spring upright, half tangled in your blanket, heart already pounding. Your squire's wide-eyed in the doorway, boots untied, cloak dragging, trying to say something between gasps. Visitors, he finally chokes out, armed, noble colours. That gets your attention. You dress quickly, tossing on your surcoat over yesterday's tunic, jamming your feet into boots still damp from the border ride. You strap on your sword with hands that move fast from habit, not confidence. Something about the squire's face tells you this isn't the usual. Someone's aunt is visiting with a goose cart kind of arrival. Outside, the courtyard is already bustling. guards snapping to formation, stable hands scattering, a cook swearing at a spilled pot. The drawbridge lowers with a groan that feels ominous in your ribs. Over the hill come 6 riders. Their cloaks flutter in the wind. Their leader rides in front with posture like carved stone. The banner trailing behind them bears a crimson boar rampant on gold. You know that sigil. It's your cousin, from Bois Roche. The cousin you haven't seen in years. The one your father once called a necessary embarrassment. He dismounts with the ease of a man used to getting his way. He spots you immediately, offers a smile that's all teeth and no warmth. Sir Thomas, he says, or should I say, Lord Thomas, now. You nod, cautiously. Didn't expect you so soon. Didn't expect to need to come so soon, he replies, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. We have much to discuss. You invite him inside, already regretting it. Over a table of cold venison and stale bread, your cousin gets to the point he wants a claim to Bois Roche. He says your father promised him tenancy rights. He brings a crumpled document, possibly real, definitely smudged, and a priest's witness, who seems more interested in the wine than legal nuance. You keep your tone measured, even as your pulse climbs. He argues. You parry. He accuses. You deflect. He's not here for justice. He's here for land, for power, for the chance to carve out a bit more turf while you're still new, still off balance. Historians still argue whether family feuds were more dangerous than foreign wars. Sitting across from your cousin, watching him measure the weight of his words and his knife hand with equal calculation, you start to understand why. You tell him you'll consider it, that you'll have your steward review the papers, that you'll pray on it. All lies, of course. You leave the table with a tight smile and a stomach full of acid. Your squire follows, unnerved. Are we going to lose your home, he whispers. No, you say, too fast. But doubt curls behind your ribs like smoke. That evening, you write 3 letters. One to your steward, asking for a full accounting of the Bois Roche estate. One to your father's oldest retainer, asking for loyalty more than anything. And one, surprisingly, to your uncle, a man you never liked but who hates your cousin even more. Sometimes enemies are just badly timed allies. You seal the letters, press your signet ring into wax that still trembles slightly under your thumb, and send them off by torchlight. Modern comparison. Imagine being ambushed at your own company's board meeting by your cousin from HR who brought legal loopholes, a notary with a drinking problem, and a passive-aggressive smile. That night, you don't sleep much. You pace your room, tunic loose, sword by the door. The keep feels colder, not in temperature, but in tone, like the walls themselves are waiting. When you do finally lie down, it's not comfort that finds you, it's exhaustion. You stare up at the ceiling and mutter, almost as if testing the words still alive, and maybe still in charge, for now. Your cousin is still here. Day 2 of his visit begins with him casually examining the training yard like he's already ordering renovations. He critiques the guard rotation, compliments your horse with the smug detachment of someone who's deciding whether or not to buy it. You begin to fantasize about jousting him off the parapet. You maintain politeness. Barely. He spends the morning talking about crop yields and cousinly obligations. You spend it trying not to grind your molars into powder. At lunch, he insists on sitting at your right hand. He pours his own wine. He tells a long, tedious story about a time he personally resolved a pig theft by bribing a bailiff and bluffing with a dead weasel. The story has no moral. You die a little inside. After the meal, you finally get a moment alone with Lord Hugo. He listens carefully as you explain the situation. The claim, the implications. He nods once and then says you'll need to go back to Bois Roche. Not forever, yet, but for now, to reassert your presence, secure the estate, and remind your cousin that inheritance is not a democracy. You agree, of course. You were already planning to, but somehow, having the order come from your lord feels like the weight of the decision has been lifted slightly, only to be replaced by another kind of weight responsibility. Historians still argue whether the feudal system functioned through loyalty or inertia. You, right now, feel like living proof of both. You spend the afternoon packing tunics, travel rations, a few sealed scrolls, and the old sword your father left you. It's not the sharpest, but it's symbolic. And sometimes, in this world, symbolism cuts deeper than steel. Your squire is unusually quiet as he straps your bags. Will it be dangerous, he asks. Probably not. You lie. You depart at dawn. It's a 3-day ride through muddy roads, bare orchards, and quiet villages. Most of the peasants recognize your colours. Some wave, some stare. A few offer cautious blessings. You nod back, trying to look less like a man who hasn't slept in 3 days. The countryside is beautiful, in the way winter can be when it's not actively trying to kill you. Frost hangs from the trees like delicate armour. The air smells of pine, dung, and impending decisions. You sleep in small keeps along the way. Hospitality is sparse cold bread, shared straw beds, a fire that always burns too low, but it's familiar in some strange way. It even feels like home. On the 3rd day, you see it. Bois Roche, your manor, your future. It rises above a low valley, flanked by fog and bent pines, with its moss-covered tower and cracked stone walls that haven't been patched since your last visit. The banner still flies, your father's sigil, now yours a silver stag on sable. It's smaller than you remember. You dismount slowly, your joints stiff, your cloak soaked from the morning mist. You stand at the gate staring up at the stone, remembering the last time you were here 19, cocky, just knighted, still believing you could change the world. Now, you just want to make sure the roof doesn't collapse on your tenants. Modern comparison. Imagine inheriting your childhood home, but the plumbing is medieval, the staff are suspicious, and someone may have forged half the paperwork. Your steward greets you at the door. He's aged 10 years in 3, but his bow is genuine. My lord, he says, welcome home. The hearth is already lit. Your old room is dusted. Even the hounds remember you mostly, but the books are out of order. The walls need mending, the granary's roof is sagging, and there are whispers that the villagers are nervous, unsure, half convinced your cousin is still coming back with a claim in one hand and a scribe in the other. You know what you have to do. Tonight, you sleep under your own roof again. The bed's too soft, the room too quiet. You lie awake staring at the same ceiling beams you counted as a child. Back when you thought knighthood was all tournaments and titles, you whisper it again, not out of habit this time, but to mark something still alive, and home. The rooster at Bois Roche still crows too early. It always did. You wake to the same bleary song you heard every morning as a boy, but now it sounds different, sharper, more urgent, like it's reminding you you're not a guest anymore. You dress in silence. The chill of your old room clinging to your sleeves. The hearth's burned low overnight. You light it again with shaking fingers and a sliver of kindling that smells like pine tar and memories. Downstairs, the household is already moving. Your steward, Henri, loyal, stiff, and always slightly offended by the concept of change, greets you with a ledger. It's thick, dusty, and held together with string. We've lost 3 head of cattle since autumn, he says, flipping pages. One was stolen, the others died, possibly of bad oats. The tenant families are nervous. They've heard rumours. You nod. Of course they have. Your cousin hasn't even needed to return. He's already here in whisper, in shadow, in every glance that lingers too long when you walk through the courtyard. You spend the morning walking the estate. The granary's roof is worse than expected. The south wall of the orchard has collapsed entirely. The well bucket is cracked. The blacksmith's son is still using a hammer that barely qualifies as metal. Everything's barely holding together, like the manor itself is waiting to see whether you'll take root, or wither. You speak with the villagers, slowly, carefully. They're polite, mostly, but you can see it in their faces. They're not sure who you are anymore. Not the boy who rode off in borrowed armour. Not the knight who sent letters once every 6 months. Not quite the lord they need. Modern comparison. Imagine being hired to manage your old high school, but the pipes are breaking. The staff is unionising, and your cousin is already on the PTA with a smug newsletter. You return to the hall for a midday meal, mostly lentils and something that might have once been bacon. The cook apologises. The pigs are thin this year. You eat quietly, then ask to see the manor rolls. Who owes what, who's paid, who hasn't. The list is long. Some of the names are familiar. Some are crossed out, gone, moved, starved, dead. You pause at one in particular, the Picard family. You remember them. Tenant farmers who once gave you a wooden horse for your name day. You rode it down the hill so many times the wheels fell off. You never forgot. Gone. Henri says simply. Left last winter. Couldn't afford to stay. You say nothing, but you feel it in your chest, like a stone. In the afternoon, you do something unexpected. You walk to the edge of the fields. You help lift a broken fence. You assist a carpenter fitting new shingles to the barn. You say little. You listen. At first, they're confused, then cautious, then grateful. No one bows. But someone offers you a mug of cider. That's better. Historians still argue whether lords were truly involved in local work or just performed acts of humble governance to maintain control. You don't care. You needed to feel the hammer in your hand again. The cold in your fingertips. The reality of your title, not just its shadow. That night, you write 3 letters. One to Lord Hugo, informing him of your return and the manor's state. One to a nearby merchant, offering to buy lumber, if he'll take payment in spring, and one to your cousin. A short one. Leave the land alone. I am here now. Lord Thomas of Boisroche. You seal it with your father's signet. You stand for a long while, staring into the hearth, the flames casting long shadows on stone. The house creaks with the night. The wind moans through the shutters. You lie in your old bed. It still smells like wax, parchment, and cold air. You close your eyes and say it again, not from defiance this time, but resolve still alive, and staying. Your 3rd day at Boisroche begins not with a problem, but with a question. Henri, ever prompt, greets you just after dawn with a scroll in hand and a furrow in his brow. There's been an invitation, he says, as if that's the worst possible news. You raise an eyebrow, still nursing the morning's bread and not quite warm ale. Baroness de Lee, he continues, is hosting a feast next week. She wishes for your presence. And possibly, he adds, voice tightening, your attention. Ah, the Baroness. You remember her vaguely from childhood visits, once widowed, twice rumoured, and always surrounded by people trying to guess what she was really planning. You haven't spoken in years. but you've heard stories she owns half the trade routes near your land now, and the other half listen when she breathes. She thinks you're weak, Henry adds, unnecessarily. Of course she does. Everyone does. That's the cost of disappearing for 3 years and returning with debt and a dusty title. You sigh. Fine. You say, tell her I'll attend. Henry flinches like you just suggested a duel in a beehive. My lord. I said yes. You repeat, and then take another bite of bread because moral certainty pairs well with starch. You spend the next few days preparing, not just for the feast, but for your reputation. You repair your father's old riding cloak. You borrow polish from the armoury and scrub your boots until they reflect your scowl. You write letters to your tenants, not just demanding taxes, but asking questions, listening. You ride out once to inspect a damaged bridge. You help clear a fallen tree from a winter trail. You even sit in on a dispute over fishing rights involving 3 families, 1 net, and a duck that may or may not be sacred. Modern comparison. It's like becoming the CEO of a barely functioning co-op, where every meeting ends in muttering and someone accuses the fish of having opinions. And slowly, people begin to notice. Not much. Just glances that last longer, bows that go a little deeper. A boy you don't know runs up and calls you sir without a sneer. You're not a good lord yet, but you're here. And sometimes that's the hardest part. Finally, the day of the feast arrives. You dress carefully, black tunic with silver trim, sword at your hip, ring on your hand. Your squire fusses with your collar, trying to smooth out a wrinkle that refuses to die. You leave it. Imperfection makes you more memorable. The ride to Castle Lys is uneventful, save for the part where your horse almost throws a shoe in a puddle deeper than some family wells. You arrive just before dusk. The castle is excessive. Tapestries in every hall, perfumed rushes, servants gliding like trained swans. You're announced with far more flair than necessary, and all eyes turn to you, a provincial lord freshly inherited, carrying the ghost of your father and the weight of a dying estate. Perfect. Baroness de Lys greets you with a practised smile. She's older than you remember, sharper too, like a dagger that's been honed over time, not dulled. My condolences, she says sweetly, and my curiosity. You bow. I brought both. She laughs. So do half the people in the room. You're not sure they understood the joke, but tone is everything. The feast is lavish roast duck, almond pastries, mulled wine spiced just enough to remind you what you're missing back home. You eat politely. You drink moderately. You listen carefully. And when the Baroness leans over and murmurs, I hear your cousin still believes Bois Roche will fall into his lap. You reply, without smiling, only if he arrives without a head. That gets her attention. Historians still argue whether political power in the Middle Ages lay in the sword, the tongue, or the purse. Tonight, you suspect it's the smile that means nothing, and the threat you don't have to say twice. You stay only as long as required. On your way out, a young knight stops you near the gate. He's fresh-faced, over-perfumed, and clearly fishing for gossip. Is it true your lands are failing? He asks casually. You pause. Then you lean in and whisper, yes, just like your training, and ride off before he can respond. You reach Bois Roche by midnight. The stars are clear, the road is empty, and for the first time in months, the gatehouse guards greet you without hesitation. You hang your cloak by the fire, unstrap your sword, and sit at your old desk. You open your father's journal. You begin writing your own. Still alive. Still lord. You don't notice the ink on your fingers until the fire's almost out. The journal lies open before you, half a page of carefully scrawled lines, then a sudden, sharp blot where you pause too long. You've written nothing profound, just notes, names, a reminder to replace the thatcher on the granary before spring rains arrive and turn your grain into porridge. Still, it feels like something, like roots, like claiming the space your father never thought you could fill. Your squire is snoring in the corner, curled up on a pile of cloaks. You wonder if you should tell him to find a bed. Then you remember he has several times, and he keeps ending up here anyway. You leave him be. The next morning, there's frost on the window, and smoke curling from the chimney means someone's already stoked the kitchen hearth. You can smell oats cooking and something vaguely resembling bacon. You smile faintly. Either your cook is feeling bold, or a pig died recently. You take your meal with the household staff today, not from humility, necessarily, but strategy. The more they see you, the less they fear you. And fear, you're realizing, is a poor foundation for loyalty. You eat in silence, listen to their chatter. The mill wheel's frozen again. A hawk's been stalking the chicken coop. Someone swears they saw your cousin's colours on a cart near the border road. That last one gets your attention. You ride out by midday, taking only 2 guards. You keep your armour light. Leather, not plate. Better to move quickly than to creak like a kettle with legs. You follow the road past the eastern fields, into the wooded path that winds toward Montcrieu's domain. You find the cart easily, abandoned in a ditch, half covered with brush, fresh tracks, though, and a broken wheel. Someone tried to disguise it, then gave up. Inside bolts of cloth, a jug of oil, and, more interesting, a scroll tube bearing Montcrieu's seal. Of course. Historians still argue whether nobles truly plotted so openly, or if local disputes were exaggerated by travelling monks desperate for something to write. As you unroll the scroll and read the word entitlement 5 times in one paragraph, you suspect the answer is simply ego. You take the scroll, burn the brush, and leave the cart where it lies. Message received. You return to Bois Roche and draft a letter, not to your cousin, not to the Baroness, but to the royal scribe in Angers. It's short, formal, and laced with just enough implication to ensure it reaches the right ears. Then you gather your men, not to fight, to work. You spend the next week reinforcing the outer wall, fixing the southern gate, patching the granary roof, and for reasons no one fully understands, digging a moat that may never fill, but looks impressive from a distance. A physical reminder that Bois Roche is no longer a rumour, or a prize, or a fading name on a map. It's yours. Modern comparison. It's like being both the CEO and janitor of your childhood home, while fending off a hostile corporate takeover from your cousin who once tried to light a barn on fire. Allegedly. You sleep less now, but feel less tired. You rise early, walk the grounds, speak to people by name. You learn who mends boots, who tends bees, who lost 2 sons to the last famine and still smiles when it rains. You begin to understand that ruling isn't about commanding, it's about showing up. One night, the steward brings word of another feast, this time hosted by Montcrieu himself. You laugh, hard. He's getting nervous. Henri doesn't smile, he's getting close. You nod. Then you put on your riding cloak, pick up your father's sword, and walk the perimeter of your land one more time before the moon climbs too high. You stop beneath the old ash tree near the border, its branches bare, its trunk carved faintly with initials long since faded. Yours, maybe, or someone else's. You stand there for a while, breathing, watching, feeling the stillness settle around you like armour. Still alive, you murmur, then, quieter, still not done. The morning after your quiet patrol, a messenger arrives. Not a noble courier, not a guard in livery, just a boy, mud-caked, breathless, and so skinny his ribs count as topography. He holds out a wax-stained scrap of parchment with both hands, like it might burn him. You break the seal with your thumb. It's from Moncrieux. Short, vague, smug. I hear Bois-Roche is lively again. Let's hope it stays that way. Perhaps we should meet, for the good of the region. Of course. B. de Moncrieux. You fold the parchment without a word. Your squire, who's been reading over your shoulder poorly, squints. Is it a threat? Worse, you mutter. It's cordial diplomacy. You send the boy off with a heel of bread and a coin the size of his face. He nearly cries. You feel like doing the same. By noon, Henri is fuming. He wants to meet here now. After everything, we should send a pig instead. Too noble a gesture, you reply. Still, you agree. Because refusing a parley would only prove you're afraid. Or, worse, unable to play the game. And this, now, is a game. One of performance, posture, and perfectly timed smiles. You send word back. 3 days later, Moncrieux arrives. He brings no soldiers, just 3 scribes, 2 stewards, and a wine steward so overdressed he could pass for minor royalty. His cloak is fox fur, his boots gleam. He looks at Bois-Roche as though it's a personal disappointment. You meet him in the hall. You don't bow. He notices. Thomas, he says smoothly, you've made improvements. I've had the time, you say, while not visiting other people's roads. He smiles, thin and deliberate. So you've heard the rumours. I've lived them. The meeting is long, tedious, decorated in the finest passive aggression. Moncrieux insists his presence near your borders was a matter of trade, and that the scroll in the cart was a draft, not a declaration. He compliments your new grain tariffs. He questions your land deeds. He eats your bread with deliberate slowness, like he's measuring it for salt. You respond with practiced indifference. You quote bylaws. You name witnesses. You mention your correspondence with the royal scribes in Angers, a detail that makes one of his stewards shift uncomfortably. Historians still argue whether medieval diplomacy was about honour or leverage. Today, you realise it's about stamina. The ability to sit in a cold room and smile until the other man flinches. By sundown, Moncrieux makes a show of agreeing to review maps. He offers to revisit toll policies in good faith. He does not win, but he doesn't lose either. It's a stalemate dressed as civility. You see him to the gate yourself. Just before mounting, he turns and says, "You've grown into this cousin." I'm surprised. You reply, and you've managed to stay the same. I'm not. His smile slips. Then he rides off. Modern equivalent. It's like hosting a dinner for the co-worker who tried to steal your job, and then convincing him that you've already installed a security camera in the break room. That night, you sleep soundly, not out of peace, but confirmation. The border will still be watched. Moncrieux will still scheme. But now, he knows you're not moving. Not quietly, not easily. The next morning, you gather your scribe and begin drafting a charter, formalising your land boundaries, clarifying toll rights, detailing village protections. It's bureaucratic. It's boring. It's power. You put your name at the bottom and press your father's signet into the wax. Still alive. Still here. And now, recognised. Spring creeps in without ceremony. There's no grand thaw, no trumpet of flowers, no poetic sunrise over the hills of Bois-Roche. Just less mud, more light, and the faint return of birdsong between chimney smoke and bleating goats. The ground softens. The frost fades. And for the first time in months, Your boots don't sink when you walk to the outer fields. You stand on the western slope, overlooking your tenant farms. They're alive with motion oxen dragging ploughs, children chasing dogs, women hanging early herbs to dry. A man waves from a barley field with the casual confidence of someone who finally believes you'll wave back. You do. It hits you, quietly, that this land no longer feels like a burden strapped to your back. It feels like something else now. Wait. Yes, but with purpose. Later that day, Henri approaches with an expression that suggests either disaster or an unexpected surplus of cabbage. Thankfully, it's neither. "My lord," he says, clearing his throat like a man preparing to say something human. "There's talk." You raise an eyebrow. "Good or bad, both." He admits. "You've been seen at the village well. Twice. You sat with the beekeeper's boy during his lesson. You helped replace the millstone." You shrug. "I live here." Henri nods, then mutters, "They're saying you belong here." That gives you pause. Historians still argue whether a medieval lord's strength came from divine right, or simply sticking around long enough not to be forgotten. Today, it feels like the latter is working just fine. By mid-morning, you're called to the watchtower. A rider is approaching, not Moncrieux, not another cousin, not a tax collector, thankfully. It's a messenger from Angers, wearing the king's colours, bearing a letter sealed in blue wax. You open it slowly. Inside a royal acknowledgement of your titles, a confirmation of your land rights, and an invitation. The King's Steward is summoning select lords to court this summer for consultation, taxation review, and possibly marriage negotiations. You reread that last part twice. You hand the letter to your squire. He reads it aloud, squinting. "Marriage," he says, voice cracking. "Are they asking you to marry someone, or is that optional?" "I don't know," you reply, stunned. But it's written in gold ink, so it must be terrible. That night, you host a feast, not to celebrate the letter, but to celebrate not being on fire. The villagers are invited. The bread is warm, the ale is strong, the roast is only slightly burnt. People laugh, music plays. Someone sings a ballad so off-key that even the dogs whimper. You don't care. You're smiling too hard. You raise a cup midway through the evening and make a short toast to warm fields, steady roofs, and fewer letters from Moncrieux. The cheer is real. Later, your squire finds you standing alone outside, looking up at the stars. "You'll go, won't you?" he asks. "To court." You nod. Slowly. Yes, but not to beg. To be seen. Modern comparison. Imagine finally paying off your student loans, fixing your parents' house, and getting a cryptic invitation to a political dinner with half a chance you'll leave married or indicted. As the fire dies down, you return to your chamber. The charter is tucked in your chest, the scroll from anger beside it. You remove your sword belt, brush the mud from your boots, and sit on your cot. Still alive, still lord, still moving forward, and for the first time, maybe ready. Preparation for court begins the next morning, and within minutes, you regret everything. The first problem, your wardrobe. Boisroche wasn't exactly left with a surplus of courtly fashion. You own 2 formal tunics, one moth-eaten, the other the colour of despair, and a cloak that smells like it was used to house a badger over winter. Your squire, ever eager, holds each item up with the hopeful expression of someone who still believes in miracles. "Maybe if we re-dye this," he suggests, holding up a sleeve the colour of old porridge. You settle on the least offensive option and send word to the local seamstress. You're not sure she's ever sewn for court, but she has needles and opinions, and right now, that's enough. While she assesses you like a carpenter sizing up warped lumber, you sit stiffly and try not to flinch when she calls your shoulders disappointingly symmetrical. "You'll look respectable," she mutters. "Barely." By midday, Henri returns with more pressing concerns: gifts. You can't show up to court empty-handed, especially not if you want to be remembered for more than your cousin's accusations and a damp coat of arms. Options are limited. The estate's silver is tied up in roof repairs. The vineyards are still sleeping off winter, and your best hawk recently retired herself by flying directly into a weather vane. But then someone mentions the beekeepers. Bois Roche has always had exceptional honey, dark, rich, spiced by the wild herbs that grow on your southern slopes. You commission a set of honey jars sealed in carved wood, each bearing your crest, each labelled with a type and a proverb from local sayings. Sweetness, you write on the card, is harder to steal than gold. Historians still argue whether medieval gifts were sincere gestures or just bribes with better packaging. You figure a little of both never hurt. The next issue who's going with you? Your squire, obviously. And Henri, for his grasp of names, land titles, and the ability to look disapproving at strategic moments. You also include one of the carpenters, whose unexpected talent with music might come in handy, and 2 guards, chosen for their manners and lack of visible nose injuries. Over the next few days, the village buzzes with speculation. A travelling bard, upon hearing your plans, insists on composing a song in your honour. You ask him politely to delay that until you've done something worth rhyming. You spend evenings walking the grounds, inspecting the fields, checking the walls, not because you doubt your people, but because you want them to see you doing it. Your presence is no longer about control, it's reassurance. On your final night before departure, you hold a quiet meal in the hall with your closest retainers. You don't give a speech, you don't raise a goblet, you just eat together. Modern comparison. It's like preparing for a high-stakes business trip where you're both the CEO and janitor, and half the company thinks you're bluffing your way through. Before bed, you pack your father's sword, not your shiniest weapon, not even your sharpest, but it carries a kind of silence that court blades don't. That night, you sleep lightly and dream, for the first time in months, of nothing at all. Just rest, just stillness. You wake before the rooster. You dress in silence. You light a single candle, and before you leave your room, you say it one last time, still alive, still Lord, now on the road. The road to court is long, winding, and damp in all the wrong places. It rains on the first day, not heavily, just enough to soak through your boots and prove that your cloak's weatherproofing was mostly optimism. You ride in silence, watching the trees thin and the hills widen into fields that belong to other lords. Some bear banners, some are bare. Your squire hums. Henri glares at puddles like they insulted his lineage. One of the guards sneezes every 15 minutes with increasing drama. You pass hamlets where children point and shout knight like you're made of legend, not mud. You wave anyway. It's important. For them. For you. On the second day, the road turns treacherous. A washed-out bridge, a fallen cart, and a travelling merchant who insists his donkey has diplomatic immunity. You help right the cart anyway, because you're a knight, and the donkey does have unnervingly judgmental eyes. By the third day, the capital's outer towers rise like teeth on the horizon. Angers, seat of the crown, court, and more velvet than you've seen in your entire life. Your group pauses at a hilltop, gazing down at the city. It's immense. Markets like spiderwebs, roads like veins, Palaces gleaming beneath a sky still deciding whether it will rain again or spare your dignity. Never seen anything so tall. Your squire breathes. Henri sniffs. You've clearly never met the Bishop of Saint-Aignan. You arrive just before dusk. City guards check your credentials and wave you through. Half impressed, half bored. Inside. The noise is overwhelming. Bells, hooves, hawkers, a boy selling eels from a basket who swears one of them can predict weather. You're led to a guest manor near the palace walls. It's not luxurious, but it's dry, and the bed doesn't smell like old onions. That's already better than half your campaigns. A steward informs you the presentation of vassals will begin in 2 days. In the meantime, you're expected to clean up, look important, and not frighten the Duchess's swans. Noted, you spend the next morning getting your boots repolished, your tunic steam-pressed by candle, and your hair trimmed by a barber who hums what may be a hymn or a warning. Henri briefs you on who's present at court barons, bishops, heirs, spares, marriageable daughters, and scheming sons. Montcrieux is here, of course, already trying to stir support among the crown advisers. You're not surprised. You're not worried. Well, maybe a little. In the afternoon, you wander the palace courtyards, pretending to admire architecture while memorizing escape routes. You meet a poet who tries to sell you a love sonnet pre-written, but adaptable. You meet a knight in gilded armour who asks if you've heard of soap. You meet a girl no older than 14 who recognises your crest and whispers, "They said you were gone." You blink. "I was." She nods, like that's answer enough. Historians still debate whether medieval court life was a centre of culture or just a well-dressed circus. From where you're standing, it's both, but with better cheese. That evening, you attend a minor gathering, diplomats, lesser nobles, and one man who introduces himself as Duke of Guise and refuses to elaborate. You stand near the honeyed wine. Someone compliments your boots. Someone else asks if you're married. You deflect both. You spot Montcrieux across the room. He doesn't approach, but he sees you, and he smiles barely. You sip your wine and smile back, then turn away first. Modern comparison. It's like walking into a networking gala after surviving bankruptcy. Only now the canapes are edible, and the rival CEO is allergic to bees. Back in your chambers, your squire asks, "Are we ready?" You nod, ready as will ever be. You sit by the window, watching torches flicker below, the sky heavy with stars and smoke, still alive, still in this. Tomorrow you enter the hall. The great hall of anger smells like roses, wax, and fear. It's massive, vaulted ceilings, columns carved with saints and lions, banners from every corner of the kingdom draping the walls like gossip held in silk. Torchlight flickers across armour, jewellery, and nervous smiles. Servants glide across the floor like ghosts in soft shoes. You stand at the edge of it all, straight-backed, boots clean, cloak fastened just right. You've been briefed, dressed, dusted, and warned. The honey jars are in a wooden chest carried by your squire, who looks like he's about to faint from a combination of awe and anxiety. Henri stands at your side, posture impeccable, voice low. Remember, don't speak unless spoken to. Don't blink if they mention taxes. And if the Duke of Guise tries to give you feathers, just take them. You nod, trying to keep your breathing steady. Then your name is called, not loudly, just enough to silence the world. Lord Thomas of Boisroche. You step forward. Every eye in the room turns. You walk the length of the hall under 100 gazes, some curious, some sceptical, some amused. Montcrieux is among them, Sipping wine with the grace of a man who's never cleaned his own boots, you stop before the dais. The steward reads your formal introduction, your title, your holdings, your service record, thin but honest, and the fact that your family has held Bois Roche since before half these nobles were conceived. You offer the chest of honey with a bow. It's taken reverently, sweeter than silver, they say. The king does not speak. He doesn't have to. His chancellor, however, steps forward. A tall man, sharp-eyed, well-fed, voice like parchment folding. You've been absent from court. Lord Thomas, I had a house to rebuild. You reply, calm, measured, and a cousin to answer for, he adds. You nod once, handled. He pauses, assessing. And what do you bring us? Besides bees and barley, you take a breath. A working estate. An honest ledger. 100 tenants who've not fled this winter, and no pending lawsuits. A few chuckles. One snort. Even the Chancellor's mouth twitches. Very well, he says. Bois Roche is recognised. Your titles stand. For now. That for now lands with the weight of a mountain. But it's not a no. Not a challenge. Not a dismissal. It's politics. You bow again and step back. Montcrier tries not to look disappointed. The rest of the morning is a blur of voices, scrolls, small nods exchanged like fencing feints. You're introduced to minor counts, a scribe who once copied your father's charter, and a duchess with 5 dogs and one opinion about drainage law. After the ceremony, you're pulled into conversation after conversation, none of which begin with hello, and most of which end with veiled suggestions of marriage alliances, trade partnerships, or invitations to come hunting sometime, which might mean deer, might mean boars, and might mean each other. Modern comparison. It's like speed dating while wearing a name tag that says may inherit trouble. Eventually, you find yourself standing beside a window, half a goblet of wine in hand, watching the courtyard below fill with departing messengers and powdered nobles who've already begun rewriting what just happened. Your squire appears with a plate of cheese. Henri says you did well. Henri always says that. He only says it when it's true. You take the cheese. You still don't trust them. Do you? Your squire asks. You look across the room at the Chancellor, Montcrier, and a bishop whispering to a merchant who shouldn't even be in the hall. No, you say, but I know how to walk among them now. That night, you dine quietly, far from the great fires and the louder tables. Your squire falls asleep against the wall. Henri reads by candlelight, muttering corrections into a travel ledger. You write in your journal, today, I stood in the hall and did not fall. They saw me. They remembered the name. Bois Roche still stands. You close the book. Still alive. Still rising. Word count 196. Awaiting continue. The great hall of anger smells like roses, wax, and fear. Its massive, vaulted ceilings, columns carved with saints and lions, banners from every corner of the kingdom draping the walls like gossip held in silk. Torchlight flickers across armour, jewellery, and nervous smiles. Servants glide across the floor like ghosts in soft shoes. You stand at the edge of it all, straight-backed, boots clean, cloak fastened just right. You've been briefed, dressed, dusted, and warned. The honey jars are in a wooden chest carried by your squire, who looks like he's about to faint from a combination of awe and anxiety. Henri stands at your side, posture impeccable, voice low. Remember, don't speak unless spoken to. Don't blink if they mention taxes, and if the Duke of Guise tries to give you feathers, just take them. You nod, trying to keep your breathing steady. Then your name is called, not loudly. just enough to silence the world. Lord Thomas of Boisroche. You step forward. Every eye in the room turns. You walk the length of the hall under 100 gazes, some curious, some sceptical, some amused. Montcrieux is among them, sipping wine with the grace of a man who's never cleaned his own boots. You stop before the dais. The steward reads your formal introduction, your title, your holdings, your service record thin but honest, and the fact that your family has held Boisroche since before half these nobles were conceived. You offer the chest of honey with a bow. It's taken reverently, sweeter than silver, they say. The king does not speak. He doesn't have to. His chancellor, however, steps forward. A tall man, sharp-eyed, well-fed, voice like parchment folding. You've been absent from court, Lord Thomas. Had a house to rebuild. You reply, calm, measured. And a cousin to answer for, he adds. You nod once, handled. He pauses, assessing. And what do you bring us? Besides bees and barley. You take a breath, a working estate, an honest ledger, 100 tenants who've not fled this winter, and no pending lawsuits, a few chuckles, one snort. Even the Chancellor's mouth twitches. Very well, he says. Boisroche is recognised. Your titles stand for now. That for now lands with the weight of a mountain, but it's not a no, not a challenge, not a dismissal. It's politics. You bow again and step back. Montcrieux tries not to look disappointed. The rest of the morning is a blur of voices, scrolls, small nods exchanged like fencing feints. You're introduced to minor counts, a scribe who once copied your father's charter, and a duchess with 5 dogs and 1 opinion about drainage law. After the ceremony, you're pulled into conversation after conversation, none of which begin with hello, and most of which end with veiled suggestions of marriage alliances, trade partnerships, or invitations to come hunting sometime, which might mean deer, might mean boars, and might mean each other. Modern comparison. It's like speed dating while wearing a name tag that says may inherit trouble. Eventually, where you find yourself standing beside a window, half a goblet of wine in hand, watching the courtyard below fill with departing messengers and powdered nobles who've already begun rewriting what just happened. Your squire appears with a plate of cheese. Henri says you did well. Henri always says that. He only says it when it's true. You take the cheese. You still don't trust them. Do you? Your squire asks. You look across the room at the Chancellor, Montcrieux, and a bishop whispering to a merchant who shouldn't even be in the hall. No, you say. But I know how to walk among them now. That night. You dine quietly, far from the great fires and louder tables. Your squire falls asleep against the wall. Henri reads by candlelight, muttering corrections into a travel ledger. You write in your journal, "Today, I stood in the hall and did not fall. They saw me. They remembered the name. Boisroche still stands." You close the book, still alive, still rising. Your final day at court begins with a summons. Not a dramatic scroll or a trumpet in the corridor, just a boy in livery, blinking too fast and holding a folded scrap of parchment like it might explode. You open it at your table, already chewing a crust of bread. It's from the Chancellor. The king requests your presence in the gardens before second bell. Wear your crest. Bring no retinue, and bring honesty. It's rare these days. See, Henri frowns when you show him the note. You're not required to go alone. No, you say, finishing your tea, but it's an invitation, not a trap. Your squire offers you the good boots. You take the ones you wore yesterday. If you're going to stand in front of the king, you'd rather do it with familiar mud on your soles. You find the royal garden hidden behind marble walls and hedges clipped into shapes that vaguely resemble lions, angels, and one extremely panicked goose. The sun is just breaking through cloud cover, painting the statues in thin light and long shadows. The king is already there. No crown, no guards, just a simple cloak and a bench, where he sits tossing crumbs to birds with the expression of a man who's seen too much and still isn't sure he's seen enough. You bow, low, but not grovelling. He gestures to the bench beside him. You sit, for a while. There's no conversation, just the sound of birds pecking at gravel, a gardener coughing softly in the distance, and the faint creak of old stone warming under morning sun. Then the king speaks. "I remember your father," he says. You nod. He remembered you too, though he cursed your taxes. The king snorts. He served during the siege of Vaya. You glance at him, surprised. He never spoke of it. He never needed to, the king says. Some men serve by sword, others by staying put. You nod, quietly. Let the silence breathe. Montcrieux, the king continues, as if switching lanes, is like a rooster who thinks the dawn follows him. You smile, just a little. He's smart, the king says, but not wise. Then he looks at you, and you, "I'm still learning, my liege." That, he says, makes you dangerous in the right way. A pause. "I'll be watching Bois Roche," the king says, "not because I distrust you, but because I think it matters. More than Montcrieux, more than the songs. You swallow. I won't fail it." He nods. "Good. Now go. Before I start liking you too much and ruin your reputation." You bow again, lower this time. You leave the garden with your back straight, your pulse steady, and the faint sense that you just walked through a storm and found yourself dry on the other side. Modern comparison. It's like being called into the CEO's office for a mysterious chat, only to leave with the understanding that you've just been quietly promoted, and now everyone's watching. That afternoon, you prepare to depart. The honey jars are mostly gifted. The cart is repacked. The horses are brushed, fed, and annoyed. Henri double-checks the scroll pouch for the 7th time. Montcrieux passes you in the courtyard. He doesn't speak. You don't stop. You ride out as the bells toll second vespers. Your squire waves at a merchant girl who waves back. Henri mutters something about court fatigue and needing a week-long nap. You smile at both. By dusk, the city is behind you. The fields are before you. And in your pocket, beneath the journal, beneath the letters, is a small pin you didn't have yesterday, the king's own crest. Nothing official, nothing declared, just a mark of interest. You rest that night under open sky, stars bright above you, fire crackling low. You whisper, not out of habit, but with purpose, still alive, still chosen, still watched. The road home feels different, not smoother, not shorter, but somehow steadier. The trees seem taller, the air feels clearer. Even the mud seems to suck at your boots with a bit less malice. You ride at a calm pace, not because you're in no hurry, but because there's no one chasing you, not with letters, not with rumours, not with scrolls wrapped in smug smiles. Bois Roche is yours, undisputed, recognised. That doesn't mean peace, that means permanence. On the second day, your party stops at a riverside inn. It's small, crooked, and smells like someone tried to cook eels with their boots on. But the fire's warm, the food is hot, and no one stares too long. You sit at a rough-hewn table, cloak steaming, and open your journal. You write, "We returned from court without shame. The king saw us. Montcrieux didn't stop us. Our land waits. We are becoming, and that becoming is louder than any bloodline. Your squire interrupts, proudly carrying a plate of something that might be stew. He looks tired, proud, and slightly singed. He got too close to the fire trying to impress a barmaid with your title. Do you think we'll go back, he asks. To court, no, he says. To that feeling of being watched, not by guards, by expectation. You pause, then answer honestly. Yes. He nods, then shrugs. Well, we'll bring more honey next time. You don't sleep well that night, but you don't sleep poorly either. Your dreams are full of names. Some you've heard, some you've inherited, some you're still earning. By the 5th day, Bois Roche comes into view. Your land, your people, your work. You're greeted not with fanfare, but with open gates, bowed heads, and a soft wind that carries the scent of pine and freshly turned earth. The banners haven't changed, but the way people look at you has. Henri unloads the scrolls before you even dismount. Your steward already has questions about grain pricing. Your scribe presents a new petition for a mill wheel repair. It's endless, beautifully endless. You handle it all without changing boots. That night, you walk the keep alone, you stop by the well, run your hand along the stone, you walk past the outer wall, where the scaffolding still stands from winter repairs. You sit on the bench beneath the ash tree by the southern field, stars above, quiet below, a life between. You open your journal again and write. We have returned to soil that remembers us. We have weathered court, cousin, crown, and self-doubt, still alive, still lord, now, finally, at peace with it. You close the book, and for the first time in a long, long while, you sleep without a sword beside your bed. The night stretches gently across Bois Roche, blanketing the hills in velvet shadow. The wind whispers through the orchard trees. Far below, the last lanterns go out, one by one, until only the stars remain, watching, soft and very old. The hearth in your chamber burns low. The coals shift with the sound of contentment, not urgency. The journal rests on the table, your seal beside it. The room smells of beeswax, wood smoke, and lavender from a bundle left on your windowsill by someone who didn't sign their name. Your boots are by the door. Your sword, for once, is on the wall. Your cloak hangs dry. Your body, tired but whole, settles into the familiar curve of the mattress. Outside, the keep creaks as it exhales the day. A hound barks once in its sleep, chasing some phantom of the field. Somewhere, a candle gutters out, and in this quiet, this rare, tender quiet, your breathing slows. Maybe tomorrow you'll rise to frost again. Maybe a messenger will bring news of another dispute, or an invitation, or trouble dressed in velvet. But not tonight. Tonight, the work is done, the story has paused, and maybe, just maybe, the echo of torchlight on cold stone, the hum of bees in the early orchard, and the feel of worn leather beneath your hand will follow you gently into sleep.